France under King Louis XIV. Grapes by Adrian. The geography of France consisted of three major bodies of waters, which would be the English Channel, which is up to the north, Bay of Biscay to the west, and Mediterranean Sea to the southeast, and included Corsica, which is would be around here on a real map. So there was three major mountain ranges in France, which would be the Alps, which bordered Switzerland and Italy, the massive Central, which is hints in the name, was in the south central part of France, and then the Pyrenees, which bordered France and Spain. Major cities consisted of there was only some, but consisted of Paris over here, Orléans, which was in the central part of France, Dunkirk and Calais, which is next to the English Channel. Religion in France consisted of three major religions: Catholic, Protestants, and Jainism, which is Catholic, but it's a kind of a branch, and King Louis XIV also attacked them along with the Protestants. Protestantism movement began in Northern Europe but in the early 16th century, as reaction to the medieval, Roman Catholic doctrines and practices, and they didn't believe in that, so they made an entirely new branch. Well, not a new branch, but a new religion. Jainism is a Roman Catholic religion, but it was a religious movement that appeared mainly in France, in the Low Countries, and Italy. Back to Protestants, Protestantism became one of the major forces in Christianity, and with the Edict of Nantes, most of the Protestants were, attacked, and almost 200 to 800,000 Protestants fled France. And then he instated the Edict of Fontainebleau, which Louis ordered the destruction of Protestant churches and the closure of Protestant schools. Achievements under Louis XIV consisted of he built the Palace of Versailles, which needed around 36,000 workers, stonemasons, artisans, and craftsmen, carpenters, and all that, and took 50 years to build. Leap forwards in the size of the French fleet, and widely believed, it wasn't true that King Louis XIV loved or admired the Navy. He more admired the army, but he did, increase the size of the French fleet immensely, and became one of the powerhouses in Europe. Back again at the powerhouse of Europe, France became a major power in Europe under King Louis XIV with his wars and all of that, territory expansions and colonies. And he also founded the Royal Academy of Dance. He loved the arts and supported and sponsored a lot of French writers, French painters, French artisans, all that. And many roads and canals were built for trade and the spurring of economics and all that. One of the major canals, which was the Canal de Midi, which connected the Atlantic to the Mediterranean Sea, or the Bay of Biscay to the Mediterranean Sea, going through southern France. Politics in Louis XIV's France was absolute power. The intendants, which were I guess you could say they're like the governors per se. They reported to the center and carried out his orders in those provinces that they governed. Nobles had little to no power. King Louis XIV diminished their power way down, and they didn't have any power. No feudalism, and it became a centralized state, meaning it all revolved around him. He believed that Europe revolved around him, the world revolved around him. And Jean-Baptiste Colbert, which was the administrative, financer for the economics in France, he strengthened the tax system and became on a major economic reforms. Economics in France, 60 million livres were in debt when King Louis XIV was enthroned, when his administrator died, his minister. But he rose that to 3,000 million, which 3 billion, and after he died because of his wars and all that, and that made France bankrupt, which this is equal to $15.7 billion in today's money, because livery was made by the Holy Roman Empire Charlemagne, and he set the price of a livery, or the purchasing power of a livery, to 1 pound of silver. And a pound of silver in 2016 was $263.08. But he rose to $15.7 billion to $789 billion. And he also, again, revoked the Edict of Nantes, which created a massive exodus of, again, 200 to 800,000 Protestants, and crippled the workforce and economy in France. King Louis XIV also gave master craftsmen privileges. A lot of two main would be they didn't have to pay taxes for 7 years, and didn't have to quarter soldiers in their household. He also began implementing plantation economy in the colonies, which was again another income to the king to finance his wars. And with that came mercantilism and import taxes to make France more self-sufficient, and France wasn't leaking money. And so to make it that France didn't leak money. Social structure in King Louis' time was the king, which was him, the clergy, which was underneath him. It was like the highest of the highest of the social ladder, and made up like 0.5% of the population, and owned 10% of all France, the land in all France. It's the highest of the nobles. And then nobles were made up like 1.5% of the population. The richest of the nobility held top jobs, government, army, courts, and although people tend to think that nobles were all rich, there were some that were poor, but many had some wealth, but only a few were filthy rich, and those few would be clergy. Again, with the clergy and nobles, these two didn't have to pay taxes. They weren't required. And come to the middle class right here, the bourgeoisie, which made up the middle class, which were the bankers, merchants, lawyers, doctors, journalists, and professors, etc., etc. And we come to the lower classes, the peasants and the city workers. The peasants made up, and city workers made up 9 out of 10 the people in France. And they were both overworked and underpaid. Thank you for coming and watching me stutter and being all nervous. Remember to like and subscribe, and goodbye.